What's up, my friend? I'm Mikey Henninger with Basement Brood Fantasy Football. Welcome to episode 58 of Inside the 20 and part 2 of our 5-part best ball draft series where I'm walking you through each and every pick I make in the main event over on drafters.com using deep research and data-driven strategy to explain why I made every selection along the way. If you missed episodes 56 and 57, we uncovered 3 years of trends from the top 300 teams and used them to kick off our own draft with Malik Neighbors, Devon Achane, Tyreek Hill, and DJ Moore. And today, in episode 58, let's go through rounds 5 through 8, dissecting why I made each and every pick. Let's roll. There is arguably no better feeling in fantasy football than when you land an absolute steal. You get my 2025 Fantasy Football Draft Dominator, which is jam-packed with strategy and analysis for 250-plus players. And he's been strong in fantasy football. He's averaging over 18 fantasy points per game over 25 career games where he's played at least 73% of the offensive snaps. 2025 Week Winner, formerly known as the Heat Map. So you can conquer start-sit dilemmas, find plug-and-play streamers, and dominate your weekly matchups with this one-of-a-kind resource, Discord community, where you can get personalized advice from 180-plus and counting sharp fantasy football minds that are helping each other dominate. 365 days of elite fantasy football analysis, resources, and Discord community. With the 7th pick in round 5, aka pick 55 overall, Jalen Waddle was going to be a hot target for us as we continue to stack the Miami Dolphins offense. But as you can see here, he was yanked off the board with the 2nd pick in the 5th round. But still, there's a lot of exciting names on the board, a lot of different ways that we can go. Do we go with a quarterback like Joe Burrow? Do we go with a running back like Chuba Hubbard, Alvin Kamara, or RJ Harvey? Do we go with a wide receiver like George Pickens, Calvin Ridley, or Jerry Jeudy? Clearly, there's a lot of different options, a lot of different ways that we can go from here, but with 1 running back and 3 wide receivers already on our roster, what does the data suggest we do with this next pick? Well, unlike rounds 1 through 4, which offered a terrific blueprint for what positions to target in what rounds, there's no clear and obvious path for round 5. Instead, we get to choose our own path. There's a lot of different ways that we can go from here. Now, technically, the most common roster construction after 5 rounds was 1 quarterback, 1 running back, 3 wide receivers, and 0 tight ends. But that roster construction accounted for just 16% of the teams in the 300-team dataset, which is not very overwhelming and not very telling. Followed closely behind that was 0 quarterbacks, 1 running back, and 4 wide receivers, but that checked in just 14% of the time, and right behind that at 13% of the time was 0 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, and 3 wide receivers. So there's no specific roster construction that was overwhelmingly convincing or more successful than another through 5 rounds. But here's what did help narrow it down. For starters, 70% of the top 300 teams over the last 3 years still had 0 tight ends on their roster after the first 5 rounds. And the next best available tight end, according to ADP, was Sam Laporta with a 6th round ADP anyway. So there's no real reason for us to reach for a tight end here, and we can eliminate tight end from consideration. Meanwhile, 54% of the top 300 teams still had 0 quarterbacks after the first 5 rounds, and without Jamar Chase or T. Higgins on my roster, Joe Burrow isn't exactly a must-have in round 5. So I feel fine eliminating quarterback from the conversation and drilling down to either a running back or a wide receiver. But which one? Well, it turns out that after 5 rounds, a solid 40% of the top 300 teams over the last 3 years had at least 2 running backs on their roster, while just 26% of the top 300 teams had 4 or more wide receivers, which is what we would have here if we drafted a wide receiver. And looking at ADP to get an idea of what wide receivers would be available to us in round 6, I was more than happy to settle for a running back here. And now the question becomes, which one? Do I take Chuba Hubbard? Do I take Alvin Kamara? Do I take RJ Harvey? Candidly, it's really hard to pass up a guy like Alvin Kamara in the 5th round. A guy that's averaging 19 plus PPR points and 6 plus targets per game after 122 career contests. A guy who has nearly 1,200 scrimmage yards in all 8 seasons that he's been in the NFL. A guy who has 67 or more targets in all 8 seasons, top 9 running back in fantasy football in 6 of the 8 seasons in his career. It's a guy who's never, ever finished lower than RB16 in fantasy football after 8 years in the NFL, and we just got him as the RB18 off the board. Now, yeah, the Saints offense as a whole, it might be an absolute dumpster fire in 2025. It might be the worst offense in all of football, but with nothing on the depth chart behind Alvin Kamara besides 6th round rookie Devin Neal and Kendre Miller, a guy who has less than 100 career touches after 2 years in the NFL, not to mention a 3.8 career yards per carry, Alvin Kamara is still going to get his. He's basically the entire offensive engine for Kellen Moore, who's the guy who just oversaw a career year by Saquon Barkley with the Eagles in 2024. Just like I did last year in 2024, I am hammering Alvin Kamara in the 5th round, and I'm not thinking twice about it. Are you a software wizard? A code ninja? A forge master? Or maybe even just a mad scientist? Then come build your career ladder with Infinity Labs, an award-winning technology company, best place to work, and business of the year with best-in-class benefits and compensation. Visit i-labs.tech. That's i-labs.tech today, where you can learn more about Infinity Labs, our expanding national presence, and why the status quo has no hold on us. All right, we're back on the clock with the 6th pick in the 6th round, aka pick 66 overall. That is a scary amount of sixes. At this point, we have 2 running backs and 3 wide receivers on our roster after round 5. So where does the data suggest that we go with this next pick here in round 6? Well, for starters, it's interesting, if nothing else, that 55% of the teams that had 2 running backs and 3 wide receivers after the first 5 rounds chose a 4th wide receiver in round 6. And for comparison, while 55% of those teams chose a wide receiver, the next closest selection was tight end, checking in at just 24% of the time. Now, here are a couple of other data points to consider before making this decision. For starters, a dominant 61% of the top 300 teams did not have a tight end yet after the first 6 rounds, and I'm more than fine not going out of my way to draft Sam Laporta, especially in his first year without Ben Johnson, and especially still when you see the tight ends that are going to be available in rounds 8, 9, and 10. And as for running backs, a convincing 44% of the top 300 teams over the last 3 years had exactly 2 running backs after the first 6 rounds. Not 1, not 3, exactly 2. Meanwhile, just 14% of the top 300 teams over the last 3 years had 3 or more running backs after the first 6 rounds. We already have 2 running backs, and the data heavily suggests staying put and not grabbing a 3rd one here. Now, as for wide receivers, on the other hand, a solid 36% of the top 300 teams had exactly 3 wide receivers after the first 6 rounds, which is where we're at currently, but a significantly better 47% of the top 300 teams had at least 4 wide receivers after the first 6 rounds. And last but not least, we have quarterbacks, which at this point in the draft is essentially a coin flip. 45% of the field had not yet taken a quarterback within the first 6 rounds, while 54% of the field had 1 quarterback. So there is a case for a quarterback here, if not a wide receiver. And candidly, if there was a mobile quarterback available in this ADP range right now, I would have considered it. But 45% versus 54% is essentially a coin flip. And again, without Jamar Chase or T. Higgins, I am once again more than fine skipping on Joe Burrow here, especially when you see the wealth of quarterback options that are going to be available in rounds 7 to 12, really. So, after all that, I went with the 47% of drafters that had 4 or more wide receivers after 6 rounds, choosing Deebo Samuel over Jordan Addison, Rome Odunze, Stephon Diggs, and more. But why? Why Deebo Samuel? Well, for starters, and this is probably boring, but once again, it was simply a matter of me balancing out my own personal best ball portfolio. You see, up to this point in the draft, I had been hammering a ton of Rome Odunze, and I certainly can't seem to stop myself from smashing the draft button when Chris Olave is available in the 6th round, and almost thankfully, Chris Olave wasn't even an option this time, otherwise he probably would have been right back on the roster with his buddy Alvin Kamara. But I also want exposure to an ascending Washington Commanders offense that finished 5th in the NFL in scoring last year, the first year under Cliff Kingsbury and Jaden Daniels. Now, the Commanders gave Deebo Samuel more than $15 million in guaranteed money this offseason, signaling heavy intent to use him and feature him heavily in his first year with the team. Now, Deebo Samuel will join forces with Cliff Kingsbury, who is a creative offensive mastermind known for being able to maximize the talents of his offensive skill players. And as for Deebo himself, he's a proven commodity in the fantasy game, averaging 15 plus PPR points in 84 career games where he played at least 30 offensive snaps. He's offered a pretty safe floor, scoring 11 plus PPR points in 75% of his games, including 15 or more PPR points in about 50% of his games. And then you have his ceiling, where he scored 20 or more PPR points about 25% of the time, and 27 or more PPR points about 10% of the time, with a career high of 35.8 PPR points back in Week 13 of 2023 against the Philadelphia Eagles. All in all, Deebo Samuel has finished as fantasy's wide receiver 37 or better in 4 of the 5 seasons that he's played at least 15 games, including 2 finishes inside the top 15 with a wide receiver 3 overall finish in 2021. And here we are getting him at his floor, drafting him as the 37th wide receiver off the board in round 6. There's definitely some boom or bust to Deebo Samuel's profile, but those potential booms in a high-scoring offense make him a terrific best ball pick in the 6th round. I have 5 spots left in a $10 listeners-only best ball draft over on drafters.com, and here are 3 different reasons that you should join us. Number 1, anybody who joins the draft gets $10 off an annual membership to my small but mighty business, Basement Brood Fantasy Football. Number 2, if you enter promo code BBFF when you join the league, drafters will double your money with a 100% deposit match up to $100. And who doesn't love free money to play best ball with? Number 3, you get a chance to humiliate me in a fantasy football league, which is probably the most exciting part of all. So smash the link that we left for you in the show notes to join the league and enter promo code BBFF when you get there to double your money. And after you do, drop best ball in the comments for $10 off an annual membership to BBFF. All right, we're back on the clock with the 7th pick in round 7, also known as pick number 79 overall. And just to recap, since it's been a while, we have Devon Achane locked in as our RB1, Alvin Kamara strapped in as our RB2, and holding down the wide receiver room is Malik Neighbors, Tyreek Hill, DJ Moore, and Deebo Samuel. In other words, we have 2 running backs and 4 wide receivers. Now, in round 7, we have a bit of a decision to make. Should we draft our first quarterback or tight end, or should we continue stockpiling at running back and wide receiver? Luckily, we have some data that can help us carve out our path from here. For starters, a whopping 79% of the top 300 teams had 4 or fewer wide receivers after 7 rounds, and we already have 4 on the roster, so the data suggests that we stay put here at wide receiver. Likewise, a dominant 73% of the top 300 teams had 2 or fewer running backs after 7 rounds, and we already have 2 on our roster, so once again, the data suggests that we stay put at running back as well. Now, as for tight end, it's a bit of a coin flip, with 48% of the top 300 teams exiting round 7 with 0 tight ends, while 49% of the top 300 teams exited round 7 with 1 tight end. But what about quarterback? 60% of the top 300 teams had at least one quarterback after 7 rounds, and we're currently sitting at 0. So that pushes us towards a quarterback or a tight end in round 7, albeit with a lean towards quarterback. And when you see what quarterbacks just so happen to be available in round 7 versus the wealth of tight ends that will be available in rounds 8, 9, and even 10, this decision is an easy one. Patrick MFN Mahomes in round 7. In fact, this isn't just one of my favorite draft picks available in round 7. This is one of my favorite draft picks in all of 2025 fantasy football. The value is unreal. As of this recording, Patrick Mahomes is among my top 5 most rostered players after 300 plus best ball drafts already this season. In fact, I'm overweight on Patrick Mahomes' exposure, landing him in 27% of the drafts that I've done when I usually prefer to cap exposure at 25%. But why should I? This is a dude who's averaging 22.2 fantasy points per game over 132 career games where he threw at least 20 passes. This is a dude with an unbelievably safe floor, scoring 16 or more fantasy points in 75% of his games, including 21 or more fantasy points in 50% of his games. This is a dude with a galactic ceiling where he scored 26 or more fantasy points in 25% of his games, including 33 or more fantasy points 10% of the time. He has a career high of 40 fantasy points, which he's done 2 different times, once against the Baltimore Ravens in week 3 of 2020, and once against the Buffalo Bills in the 2021 AFC Championship game. This is a dude who, at absolute worst, finished as fantasy's QB 12 or better in all 7 seasons that he's been the Chiefs' starting quarterback. This is a dude who, at best, has finished as a top 4 quarterback in 4 of those 7 seasons, including 2 different finishes as fantasy's number 1 overall quarterback. He currently has the 3rd best odds of leading the entire NFL in passing yards. He has the 4th best odds of winning a 3rd MVP award in 2025, and that's something that you just can't do without posting mouth-watering statistics. And you're saying I can get this guy as my QB1 in the middle of the 7th round? Sign me up twice. Patrick Mahomes is an auto draft in round 7, and now I'm targeting Chiefs pass catchers the rest of the way, which leads us to round 8. All right, we're back on the clock with the 6th pick in round 8, aka the 90th overall pick in the draft, and frankly, just like the guy we just drafted, Patrick Mahomes, this is about as automatic as it gets in the entire draft. For starters, the most popular roster construction for the top 300 teams after 8 rounds is 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 4 wide receivers, and 1 tight end. That combination checks in about 19% of the time, while no other roster combination occurred even so much as 14% of the time. Furthermore, a dominant 93% of the top 300 teams exited round 8 with 1 or fewer quarterbacks, which is exactly where we're at. A very nice 69% of the top 300 teams exited round 8 with 4 or fewer wide receivers, which is exactly where we're at. An ever so slightly favorable 51% of the top 300 teams exited round 8 with 2 or fewer running backs, which is exactly where we're at. But tight end, a convincing 61% of the top 300 teams exited round 8 with at least 1 tight end, which we do not currently have until now. Now, sure, Travis Kelce is nearing geriatric levels. He's entering his age 36 season. He's coming off the worst statistical season of his career. He posted new career lows in yards with 823, touchdowns with only 3, and perhaps most alarmingly, yards per catch at 8.5, while his previous career low was 10.6. It was by far the worst statistical output of Travis Kelce's career. And yet still, this guy finished as a top 5 tight end in all of fantasy football. Travis Kelce has finished as fantasy's tight end 8 or better in each of the last 11 years. Let me say that again. Top 8 or better in each of the last 11 years. He's just 1 year removed from finishing as Fantasy's tight end number 3. He's just 2 years removed from his most recent finish as Fantasy's number 1 tight end. He's also likely to have positive touchdown regression on his side in 2025. You see, in his career, Travis Kelce was averaging 7.6 touchdowns per season, and he scored just 3 last year. And before last season, he averaged 1 touchdown every 12.3 catches in his career. But last year, it took him 32.3 catches for every touchdown that he was able to score. Those are numbers that are likely to creep closer to the norm for Travis Kelce, a guy who's averaging 17.5 PPR points and 8.8 targets per game after 130 career games with Patrick Mahomes. This is a guy with a historically safe floor, scoring 11 or more PPR points 75% of the time, including 17 or more PPR points 50% of the time. And we know about his monster ceiling, where he scored 23 or more PPR points in 25% of his games, including 28 or more PPR points 10% of the time. And if you're looking for some old man inspiration, then look no further than another GOAT tight end who used to play for the Kansas City Chiefs, Tony Gonzalez. Remember that Tony Gonzalez posted 121 or more targets, 83 or more catches, 859 or more yards, and 8 touchdowns in both his age 36 and age 37 seasons, numbers that would have been good for a top 5 finish in 2024. Now, is it possible that we're past Travis Kelce's best if used by date and we've witnessed the beginning of an end of his legendary career? Absolutely. But being past his expiration date means he's coming at a supreme discount, and we're not buying him in the first or second round anymore. Instead, we're getting a Hall of Fame tight end in the middle of the 8th round at pick 90 overall, stacking him with his longtime partner in crime, Patrick Mahomes. Fantasy football does not have to be complicated. Draft the GOAT, invest in one of the NFL's best offenses, and move on to round 9. If you enjoyed today's episode, or any of my content really, please be sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and ring the notifications bell so you don't miss part 3 of this 5-part series. And if you want to take me on in a private best ball league, don't forget to join my listeners only league. Smash the link that we left for you in the show notes, and be sure to enter promo code BBFF to double your money. Come back for episode 59 and part 3 of our 5-part series, where we're going to dive deep into why I chose who I chose in rounds 9, 10, 11, and 12 of this very best ball draft. I'll see you on the fantasy football field. Cheers. This brew's for you.